You're listening to The Fire Break with Steve Wolf.
Welcome back to The Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. As you know, The Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire, developing innovative technology for keeping places from burning down. Places like Texas, places like Colorado, California. Things are bad all over, and they're apparently getting worse. So I've got Christie Wiley with us today, and she's with the Hill Country Fire Coalition of Texas. Told you I'd remember that.
There we go.
And she's working to figure out how to keep the hill country from burning down, which is of great importance to me. I raised 3 sons in the hill country. What a great part of the world that neighborhood of Texas is. Christie, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I'm fine, thank you.
Good. So you come to this from a long background with the U.S. Forestry Service. Tell me about your career.
Well, I did about 16 years with the U.S. Forest Service. I worked in crisis communication, policy development, supported the director. I did his speech writing, his presentations, all that kind of good stuff as well. And then in 2011, he and I had talked about kind of working with the DOI to message things to Congress with one voice. And so in 2011, we did a combined position with the U.S. Department of the Interior's Office of Wildland Fire. And I ended up retiring from there as the communication director back in 2017.
But you couldn't sit still, could you?
No.
All right. So tell me what happened next.
Well, I grew up with a mother who said, you run from old age. So when I retired, she said, you need to run from old age. So I became a professional volunteer. And so when my husband and I moved from Colorado down to Texas so that he could help his family on the family ranch, I wanted to apply for a grant through the NRCS to do some work, fire mitigation work on the ranch. And the first question was, does your community have a community wildfire protection plan? And I thought, oh, they have to. But when I looked, they didn't. So I contacted the fire chief and said, is this wrong? And he said, no, it's not wrong. We don't have one. And so I said, well, when you get ready to do one, I'm happy to do that. One of the big projects that I worked on, working for Tom Harbor at the U.S. Forest Service at the time, was the National Cohesive Wildland Fire Management Strategy, which, of course, community wildfire protection plans were a part of that. And so I had quite a bit of an experience working with those. So I offered to help the county do that. We started it in 2019. I recruited the fire chief from Boerne, and we went to both the commissioner's court here for the county and the city of Boerne and got our proclamations, and we were ready to get started. And then, of course, COVID hit. So we put it on the back burner until 2022. And in April of 2022, by that time, Doug Meckel, the fire chief from Boerne, had retired. So I said, oh, you don't get out of this so easy. And so he and I teamed together and we volunteered to do the Community Wildfire Protection Plan for Kendall County.
Wow.
So we had an interagency core team. We got a bunch of partners together that worked with us. We, of course, worked with the 6 volunteer fire departments that provide fire response to Kendall County and the city of Boerne, who's the only career, fire department in Kendall County. And we sat down and we worked real hard and we developed the county's CWPP and had it to the state and approved by August of 2023. So, we worked real hard. We put together what the state called the most comprehensive community wildfire protection plan that they have. We went a little above and beyond. I was a member of a national incident management team for 7 years with the Forest Service. So when there is a catastrophic fire, I know what the teams look for when they come in. So we made that part of our plan so that, the plan is developed and set up by fire response area. So when they, if God forbid a team like that comes in, they can just pull a lot of the information that, I would go in and as the public information officer for the team or the liaison for the team, I would be asking those agency administrators for. So we did that. And then after, personally, I put 3,000 hours of volunteer time into that plan.
Wow.
So after we hadn't seen any action on the plan for about 8 months, Doug and I went back to the commissioner's court and we said, we'd like to know, how are you going to, implement the plan? We had not gotten any less risk. We continued in the drought. We continued the rapid development of Kendall County. Kendall County is one of the fastest growing counties in the nation. 94% of their development is in the wildland urban interface, right, where most wildland fires happen. So we said, how are we going to, implement this plan? Talked with them a little bit about some options. And at the end of it, I actually created a 501c3 nonprofit, the Hill Country Fire Coalition, and our major project is to help the county implement the Community Wildfire Protection Plan.
And what are the areas that you want to start with on that? Is that roadside mitigation or?
Well, in the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, we identified the highest risk areas in the county. And they're identified by, whether they're an extreme risk, high risk, moderate risk, or a low risk. And so what we did was we sat down and we talked about the mitigation strategies that we wrote for the plan. That's something that's also a little different than our plan than some of the other plans that you'll see is, a community wildfire protection plan is a 10-year plan. Mm-hmm. And so, the popular way of doing it was to identify specific projects that need to be done. But, from my perspective, a 10-year plan is an awful long duration in a rapidly growing county to expect to identify plans now that might have to be done in 10 years. And when grants tie a lot of it to, your request for a grant is tied quite a bit to the projects that you identify in the plan. I went back to the U.S. Forest Service and said, how about if we develop mitigation strategies? We look at our risks, we look at strategies to mitigate those risks, and then, we write them globally for the area that the plan covers. That way, if today in Comfort, Texas, the risk is there, I can use one of those strategies to modify that risk in Comfort. If, 10 years from now, it's over in Kendalia on the opposite side of the county, I can use those same strategies, but it's not tied to a specific area. So we sat down and we said, okay, we think if we developed a program that was 4-pronged, we thought that we could hit those different strategies. And so our first, of course, is outreach and education. You don't know what you don't know. The major thought process of everybody, no matter what you think of, is it's never going to happen here. It hasn't happened here before. It's kind of what we saw with the flood. They had floods before, but they never had a catastrophic flood, a 1,000-year catastrophic flood before. So it never happened here. We didn't, and that's how it is with fire. When you are in what I call the Western fire states, people grow up with fire. They, have seen it all their life. They know the impacts. They know how catastrophic they can be. And here in Texas, they haven't really seen that yet. They've seen pockets
Periodically, right? The Bastrop fire. And
we've had we've had the smokehouse. Every year though, there seems to be another fire in Texas. So the first thing we do is outreach and education, and we do that in the format of workshops. We set up stages, and they go through those stations to, we start with a little video that is, it's a part of the 60-minute show on the Paradise fire, the campfire on Paradise.
Yeah.
And the reason that I picked that was because, in Kendall County, we have so many miles of really narrow one way in, one way out roads. That's my greatest fear is that you're going to see what happened in the campfire. People had trouble getting in, the fire apparatus had trouble getting in. People had trouble evacuating. People were, out of their cars in that horrible situation. So, I use that just to increase people's awareness. We have some of the same weather, some of the same topography, the narrow roads, the one ingress and egress. So we do that first, just to pique their, interest in learning more. And then we set up the stations that talk about the FireWise program, what that is, talk about landscaping with more fire resilient plants and shrubs. We do the Ready, Set, Go program. We talk about the hardening of homes and what that means. And so then our last station is we use a sim table. And with that sim table, we will write a scenario based on whatever part of the county we're in. We pick the highest risk area, and we run a fire scenario through there so that they can see if they participate and they do some fire mitigation work, how we project the fire will run through the area. And then if they don't, how it looks. And
I see.
It's always interesting. I like to tell the little story that we had a lady from the Tapatio area, which, they have the box canyons, they have the seat chucked with cedar. And we ran the fire scenario, and of course, it runs uphill very rapidly. And she was like, "What do you mean it runs uphill? I thought putting my house on the ridge would save it."
Oh, no. Yeah, from a flood it might.
Yeah, at the time we had help from the Texas Forest Service. They had a mitigation specialist that came and helped us run the table. And she looked at her and she said, "Well, ma'am, in a flood scenario, that would work pretty well." But not
Exactly.
So that's the first one. The second one is we do free confidential property risk assessments, where we can, we have them sign up at the workshops, or through word of mouth now, people just call and say, "I want a property risk assessment done." We'll go out. We use the principles of the FireWise program, the 3 zones. We give them a nice little report. We assure them, we sign that it's confidential. We assure them that we don't, share that with anybody else, but it's a great tool for them if they want to share it. And then our third program is the Defensible Space Roadside program, where we can get the permission of the private landowner. We work with other nonprofits like Team Rubicon. And we'll go in and we'll cut back those really narrow one-way in, one-way out roads from the 30-foot right-of-way that the county has back to 50-foot on each side. And we picked that because we thought that way we could get a fire apparatus in and we could get folks out. So that's our third program. Our fourth program is working with the state Department of Insurance and the Insurance Council of Texas to try to develop some more incentive programs for people to get involved and get some kind of little carrot to do that.
The carrot could be, a reduction in insurance premiums now in many of the models, like what Rock Rose Risk is doing.
Right. Well, we actually had the state fire marshal come to one of our meetings. She had heard about the coalition, and at the, state fire marshal's state meeting, she asked the city of Bernie's fire marshal about the organization and would we be open to her attending a meeting. And when she came, she's like, geez, how can I help? And I said, well, the biggest help would be if we could work with people, in the insurance industry. We touched on that. We did that during the cohesive wildland fire management strategy. But, I don't think that we got where we should have gotten, as deep as we should have gotten with them. And so she set up a meeting and a few of us went over and we met with Austin Fire. There were several fire departments from the Austin area. We had the representative for ICT there. And, it was kind of interesting when you talk to him because, it's interesting on one point and understandable on another point. The other side is that when I talked about wildfire and I talked about, how if they would offer these incentives to insurers and they did the work, that it actually benefits the insurance industry because it lessens their risk for underwriting. And, he sat there and it was almost like a bubble or a, light bulb went on. And, he said, I said, if I build a house down on the coast, you'll give me, and I do it to code, you'll give me some some incentives for that. If I take a driving course, you'll give me that, And he was like, we need to think about that. And so he invited us to come to the state's symposium this year. And so we went over and we were part of a panel with some other folks from the insurance industry, Texas A&M Forest Service. And so we're hoping that, we can continue that conversation as well. And then for this year, we are exploring whether we can do a grant program. And the reason
and what does that look like?
The necessity is caused from the state and federal grant programs actually use the county's average median income as a screen out. So they've offered two or three rounds of fire mitigation grants for private property owners, but each time the entire Kendall County is screened out. We're fortunate to have that component of the population where the average median income is way exceeded, but that's the small pocket. That's not the normal guy. So what we want to do is we want to take some of the funding that the county is giving us and we want to create a grant program of our own. And, I want to call it Bridge the Gap. We're going to bridge that gap that's created by the state and federal system using the countywide AMI and screening us out that, we'll put it at the applicant's level. And if they have an assessment done by us and they, want to do work, and for whatever reason, whether it's financial, it's physical, it's, that they have a parent that they just are focused on providing all their care for, and they can't do it because they don't have time. We'll do that 4 times a year. We'll open an opportunity for folks that have had the assessments done to actually apply to get some help. And we're trying to work with contractors right now for those that want to do that type of work, that will understand that they'll have to do the project, have us come and look at it and approve the project before we can pay them directly. Texas statute does not allow for us to take funds that we get from the county and give them directly to any resident. We can pay the contractor direct, but we can't, which makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
There's a lot to that.
And so what kind of costs do you think these mitigation efforts, the physical mitigation, will incur?
I think it all depends on, what they've done. What a lot of the hill country, as far as hardening homes, the HOAs have covered that. If you're in one of the newer HOAs, they require the stucco, they require the stone, they require all that kind of thing. So a lot of that's taken care of. It's that some of that's just the simple work in that immediate zone, that 0 to 5 foot out from the house, where they might have, woody mulch or nothing, but, grass growing up to the house, or, in a lot of the outer areas, you have that rangeland grasses, that type of thing. So a lot of that is just, it wouldn't take much to contribute to the safety of the resident. If we focused on that 0 to 5 foot, and then possibly some work that helps some of these areas that are, just the one way in, one way out, very narrow roads, working with Team Rubicon. They donate all their time, their efforts, their equipment a lot of times. So, a lot of that's just, we would incur costs for hauling, that off. But at the same time, we have that little pocket of money that the county gave us this year, but we're in 501c3. So, and we are, there's a reason why Kendall County exceeds the average median income. So I'm definitely going to be seeking folks that understand how they can contribute, get a benefit of a tax deductible donation, but they could contribute to that program very well.
I see. And you said that your CWPP, exceeded that are of many other communities that have created them, right? That you looked into additional risks, additional problems, additional mitigation options. Is your CWPP something that would be available for people who are trying to plan one in another community?
Yes. We actually, it's posted on the county's website. We turn the plan over to the county. It's actually the county's plan. And, what the coalition does is we're just here to help them. They lack the capacity to be able to implement the plan, like a lot of, smaller communities would. And we're actually the first, we're the only fire safe type council organization, in Texas. I requested a meeting with Texas A&M Forest Service before we did the 501c3, and I contacted them and said, I want to talk to you about fire safe councils, and if you know anything about me, it's kind of like, I'm kind of passionate about, what I donate my time for. And, honestly, Steve, it would break my heart for Kendall County to have a catastrophic wildfire and lose a life.
Yeah.
And so, at times when my husband says, there is this word no, it's like, I understand that, but I also understand, the risk here. And
Yes.
so, um, it's just part of me that, I need to be able to do it. And so,
And with hotter, drier, and windier
right.
conditions coming to the county,
Mhm.
the likelihood that you're going to have a fire and that it not be catastrophic is small.
Right. Exactly. Like I said, when we started, 94% of our building is in the wildland fire, in where you're going to find your wildland fires the most. It's in your urban interface, and then with, the traffic that we have in the county, and sometimes, during the day, if you come through the county and the schools are getting out at the same time that everybody's on the roads, I look at that and think, gee, if we had a fire started in those areas, and we have 6 volunteer fire departments. We have the one career. The volunteer fire departments do a phenomenal job. And, where in other parts of the country, the volunteerism is dying because you have a lot of career fire departments. Here in Kendall County, that, some areas have more, issues finding people than others. But really, I think that, if they're a model, I think they're great. I think they do a great job. And they support each other. They have a great mutual aid, working together. So that helps as well. But yeah, and I say the stars align, in the wrong direction.
Yeah, right. Very interesting. So, to what degree do you feel, obviously, I would imagine high, but your background with the Forestry Service makes you uniquely qualified to develop these type of CWPPs?
I would think so. I think that, unfortunately, the Texas Forest Service, for example, the wildland urban interface, I think her title is mitigation specialist, that covers San Antonio area, our area, Kendall County, Bear County. She covers 27 counties.
Oh my goodness.
And that's not, for a long time we didn't have one. While we were creating the plan, Kendall County, the person had left that covered that 27 counties. And
Right.
so, the mitigation specialist that helped us, like, at the workshops to run the sim table, she was from Victoria, and she would come up and help us, and so they're spread so thin that, I don't know how people get them done, other than there's contractors out there that will do them.
Right.
If you looked at the Community Wildfire Defense Grant, the federal government was giving up to $250,000 to do a plan. So, I
And
teach
that's just
the
to create the plan, right? Not to execute it.
right, and that's not to implement it. And so, I've had conversations with Texas Forest Service and said, and not picking on them at all. It's just it's like any other state. We mandate these plans, at the federal level, like NRCS, when I wanted to apply for that grant and couldn't because we didn't have one. So we mandate them, but then it's like, okay, now I got a plan,
Right.
of whatever kind of plan you have, just check the boxes and have a plan.
Right.
But how do you implement the plan? And that was the question, when we went back to Kendall County, was, okay, how are you going to implement your plan? And they were, they tried to look at one employee that's already, overtaxed, And he and I had a conversation before we even went in and talked to them. And, it was like, I said to them, no offense to this poor person, but he's already overtaxed and it's just not going to get done. So
Right.
how about we look at, this thing we call fire safe council types of organizations, and I'll set up the 501c3 and we'll implement the plan. Now, we're all volunteer. I'm really fortunate. I don't know whether you had the chance to look at our team. When I went to the attorney, and the attorney said, okay, you're going to need 3 board members. I said, I don't want board members. I want to set it up as, according to the incident command system, so that I have people with specific roles. And so, we have Chief Meckel, who has 40 some years worth of experience in fire and was the city's fire, the city's fire chief. We have D.W. Ivins, who I met when we did a workshop over in Comfort, and he came up and said, Christie, what did you do for the Department of Interior? And I told him, and he said, oh, I just retired as the FMO, Fire Management Officer, off the Big Bend National Park. And so it was like, sign here. I want your contact information. And so he's operations. Doug's logistics, he's operations. We have a gentleman by the name of Grant Hubble, who is retired from California out of, the San Bernardino County fire. And he's our plans person. And so we have some really good fire, folks with fire backgrounds.
You really do. You've really recruited an amazing team, and focused them on such a valuable project. If folks want to get in touch with you and learn how to recreate what you've done in their communities, what's the best way to reach you? Is that on your website?
I would say probably the email info at hcfcoftx.com.
Okay.
Or, if they want to call me, or they can fill it out on the website. We have a contact sheet like every, there's a phone number on the website. So probably the website's the best way.
Absolutely inspiring work you're doing there, Christie.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
It's frustrating at times. It's rewarding at times, but that's volunteerism. It's how it is. You have to really believe in what you're doing.
Well, for your current and your past career, thank you for your service.
Well,
My guest today, Christie Wiley with the Hill Country Fire Coalition of Texas. It's a mouthful, but
it is.
But they're doing a lot of great work. Christie, thanks so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Steve.
Thank you. You've been listening to The Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. Our guest today, Christie Wiley. We're sponsored by Team Wildfire. Check us out on the web at teamwildfire.com. Until I see you next time, check up and make sure your community has a CWPP. And if you don't, get in touch with Christie and she'll show you how to put it together. Take care. Bye-bye.